Hosta La Vista is brought to you by Green Hill Hostas. Welcome to Hosta La Vista, the podcast where the shade is cool, the leaves are lush, and the friendship's perennial. We are your hosts. I'm Betsy Peterson.
And I'm Mandy Olson, two hobbyist sisters who love this plant as much as you do.
Join us each week as we dig into all things hosta, the plant affectionately known as the friendship plant.
Welcome back, listeners. This week, we wanted to address something that comes up frequently on social media, native plants.
You don't have to spend much time on Instagram before you come across conversations about native plants and strong opinions about what does or doesn't belong.
The reality, though, is a bit more nuanced. So we wanted to use this episode to explore some of the questions that come up when people talk about native versus non-native plants. As hosta enthusiasts, we may feel this topic a little personally, but we know we're not alone.
We have found that focusing on curiosity and shared learning tends to go further than criticizing what people choose to grow. Our guest today is Neil Diboll, owner and operator of Prairie Nursery in Westfield, Wisconsin, about an hour north of Madison, and a consulting ecologist recognized internationally as an expert in native plant ecology. He's considered a true pioneer of the native plant industry, and his work over the decades has centered on aesthetics, sustainability, and working with the land rather than against it.
In 2013, the American Horticultural Society honored Neil with their Great American Gardeners Award. He's also the co-author, with Hillary Cox, of The Gardener's Guide to Prairie Plants. 665 pages, more than 1,200 pictures, and pretty much the definitive reference for anyone serious about prairie restoration.
And here's a fun bit of context for our audience. Neil's been passionate about prairie and native plants since the 1970s. Along the way, a friend in the hosta world convinced him to give hostas a try, and for a time he fully embraced what he called his hosta phase, until the deer had other plans.
Neil, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
Before we get into the deep end, give us the short version. How did your journey with prairie and native plants evolve over the years, and where did that hosta chapter fit in?
Well, with everything in life, you blame your parents. And my parents were wildflower aficionados. My mother's family's from western Colorado, and so we would go for wildflower walks, which was the family tradition for generations. And so, of course, that was transferred to me. And I never really, this was never a plan. When I was 18 and went to college, I was going to save the world through environmental engineering. And then I realized, I don't know, maybe this isn't it. So then I kind of wandered around and worked for the U.S. Forest Service, for the Park Service, and for the University of Wisconsin. And all of a sudden, a friend and I walked this remnant prairie in 1977, and there was prairie blazing star blooming. I said, "Oh my God, that's gorgeous! What is that?" He said, "Oh, that's prairie blazing star. I just picked a snake." I'm going, "I'm in. I am so in." And I got the bug, and once the bug gets you, it's really hard to get out of it. So I started managing the Arboretum at the University of Wisconsin Green Bay, where I went to school. And then the gentleman from whom I bought a lot of seed for my restorations turned 68 and decided to retire. And so I called him up and said, "Hey, Bob, can I move the plants from your nursery up to Green Bay, where I'm living in an old farmhouse, and there's some land I can use?" He said, "Well, yeah, but you could come down here and run it." I'm like, "Come down there and run it? What in the world?" Okay. So I went down to Westfield, which is a 2-hour drive, and we hit it off, and so the rest is history. So that's how I got into this. And then a buddy of mine, I was a member of the Perennial Plant Association for many, many years, and a friend of mine was a big hosta grower, and we would hang out and just have a great time. And he and a bunch of friends came up to my house, and he brought a bunch of hostas and said, "Neil, I brought these hostas. I'm going to make you love hostas." And he started planting them. I'm like, "Jim, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm planting hostas because you're going to love hostas." I said, "You're out of your mind. I'm not into hostas." Well, he planted those hostas. Of course, I can't kill them. And there was Summit Substance and Blue Angel and Hosta Marginata, all these things like, wow, these are really beautiful. And then I got hooked on hostas. So I spent a lot of money on hostas just to have the deer eat them.
Oh.
But they did well for a while, and then the deer population exploded, and the game was over. So I wasn't going to put up big fences and spray them every month with anti-deer stuff.
Yeah.
It just became untenable. So at my house, if the deer don't eat them, they live. If the deer eats them, they die. It's real simple. I'm done fighting them. I got 20 acres. I'm under this delusion that I can do a native restoration on 20 acres, which is, of course, is a fool's errand. But I am making progress. But unfortunately, the hostas are gone. But I loved them. I really did. And as you point out, they're not invasive. I mean, some of them will self-sow. I got a few that self-sow, but they're not.
Sure.
They don't go crazy.
No, they don't.
So that's my hosta phase. I love them dearly, and I'm a native plant guy through and through. But I'm not a plant Nazi.
Sure.
Okay. What are we going to do? Send all the apple trees back to Kazakhstan? I don't think so.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
So, but there's a difference between nice plants and not nice plants. The difference between thugs and good members of the community. This applies to native and non-native. Our worst weed in prairies in the upper Midwest is Canada goldenrod, a native plant. I'll take Canada thistle over Canada goldenrod any day. Okay. So you can't just say it's native, it's good, it's not native, it's bad. That's absurd. It's completely unscientific.
Sure. This is one of the very first questions I wanted to ask you is, let's just ground this conversation for listeners who hear the terms native, non-native, and invasive thrown around online and aren't totally sure what those words mean. So can we start with some definitions of those three terms?
Sure. So a native plant is the generally accepted definition of a native plant is a species that grows in a given location or region at a certain period of time. And that's constantly changing. So where I live in central Wisconsin, if I were to restore what was here 15,000 years ago, if you believe the gospel according to the geologists, which I tend to do, okay, if I were to restore what was here 15,000 years ago, what would I have to plant?
I don't know. I can't imagine it would be what's alive today.
It would be a mile of ice called a glacier.
Okay.
It was only 15,000 years ago. That's a blink of an eye geologically. That's nothing. That's literally a blink of an eye. Okay, so when the glaciers retreated, and this is fascinating because the bog pollen records, which this was a technology pioneered by the Norwegians in the late 19th century, where they drilled down into bogs, and it's you can correlate the date to the depth of the peat, which preserves pollen in an acid anoxic environment. And so some species do preserve, some don't. But they look at the tree, mostly tree and grass pollen that's preserved, and you can make inferences about what the plant communities were. So and you look at American bogs in Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, you can see that right after the glaciers retreated, which is when the bogs came as water bodies that filled in with peat over 10, 12,000 years. In the bottom, you have spruce, fir, cold-loving species, and white pines and general pines. And I can't tell the exact sequence, but it goes back and forth. Then you have oaks, and then you have prairies with the grass pollen, savannas, etc., fire-adapted ecosystems. This was usually about 8,000, 10,000 years ago during what they called the xerothermic period. They have a fancy new name for it now, but it was a hot, dry period where prairies actually are believed to have extended all the way to the East Coast, and that's factual because we know there were prairies on Long Island, all the way to Long Island. Prairies in Connecticut, New Hampshire, Maine, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. So, and this was during a hot, dry period, and native people burned the prairies, thus reducing the forest. So anyway, so you had this whole event, and then sugar maples and basswoods came in, so there's this constant invasion back and forth just over the last 12,000 years since the glaciers went back to Canada. So nativity in that time period has fluctuated from all these different plant communities, and that's in a very short period of geological time. So people say, I want to restore what was here. I want to do the right thing and restore what was here before Euro-Americans came and plowed everything up. So like usually our surveyors were from the 1830s, 1840s, so people want to replicate those communities, which is perfectly reasonable. Except as the world changes, you can go back to that time, but that may not be the best choice at this time based upon climate change, etc. It might be great. I plant all of it. I've been moving plants from the south for the last 30 years, okay? Not because I anticipated global warming, although it was obvious, but because I'm a gardener, okay? Yeah. And I'm cheating, okay? Well, I can only plant something that's from 50 miles away. Like, all right, well, get real. Nature doesn't respect that.
Right.
A milkweed seed in Kansas on a 20-mile-an-hour wind in 24 hours, that's in Ohio, okay? Wow. So you have a genetic flow from west to east, okay? Yep. So, I mean, how can you make these arbitrary made-up boundaries when nature has no respect for those? Mm-hmm. Seeds travel by water, they travel by wind, they travel by birds. There's a species of pine in southern Mexico and it's almost, it used to be called a subvariety of white pine. How did it get there? Bird migration. Okay. Thousands of miles. Okay, so you can do whatever you want, human beings, but Mother Nature does not respect those artificial boundaries. So that's nativity. What is non-native? Well, non-native can be regional. It can be by country. It can be by state. Okay, for instance, pale purple coneflower is considered an endangered plant, a wild quinine, an endangered plant in Wisconsin. Why? Because there's only 12 or 14 populations known because of a political line. You go into Illinois and Missouri and Iowa, they're all over the place. So it's politically endangered. It's not ecologically endangered necessarily. I mean, all prairie stuff is pretty endangered just because there's hardly any left. Okay, but it's politically endangered. It means nothing. Okay, because on a regional standpoint, there's plenty of them, generally speaking, in remnant prairies. Okay, so people's definition of nativity sometimes is colored by strange factors that don't really have anything to do with the natural world. But most people consider a non-native plant something from another region, like a global region, like across the ocean, because these are the barriers that prevent them from getting to another place. And the problem we have is you get these plants that come from Europe and Asia and Africa, whatever, and they have no natural enemies. And so they expand like crazy because nothing is eating their leaves, nothing is destroying them, there's no diseases to keep them in control. Okay, and so they go crazy because they have no natural enemies. So those are the real problem children, those are the thugs. But most non-native plants, they don't bother anybody. But all it takes is a few, it's that kid that sits in the back of the room and throws spitballs at everybody, well, the whole class has to stay after, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But I mean, we have all these non-native plants that are incredibly invasive and are extremely destructive, and that's why people get so upset about it, because you're seeing a reduction of biodiversity in the natural world, and it is tragic. What is going on with non-native plants, not only tragic, but it costs billions of dollars a year to agriculture. And look how much time people spend clearing buckthorn, honeysuckle, garlic mustard. That's a complete waste of human resources, but it's there. So you deal with it.
So that leads me to the next term, invasive. So what exactly tips something that is non-native into that invasive category?
Well, it's not non-native, it's just invasive by nature. Okay, so there are invasive plants, native and non-native. When it starts to become destructive to other plants and members of the ecosystem is what I would use as a definition for invasive, where a plant takes over and excludes other species to the denigration of that community, the reduction of biodiversity, the reduction in beauty. Then you have what were once beautiful woods with all these spring ephemerals and beautiful flowers, and the buckthorn comes in and snuffs everything out, because buckthorn it has early emerging leaves and they stay on the plant until late in the season, so they just smother everything from April through October.
Okay.
And so there's no light at the ground layer, and you lose this, what in many cases are beautiful, diverse ground layers, and then you lose all the insects and everything, the pollinators that are associated with those plants, and then you start to see a complete ecosystem, an almost complete ecosystem collapse. So if you're into biodiversity and natural beauty, things like buckthorn, honeysuckle, autumn olive, I mean, these are just invasive thugs, and very destructive and really, really depressing.
You've described native as basically a snapshot in geologic time, a plant that happened to be in a place at a particular point in history. Why frame it that way, and how far back are we really talking?
That's a very good question. How far back do you want to go? I mean, what do you want to do? Most people use the information from early explorers and botanists from 16, 17, 18, 1900s. Because that's the baseline, and so that's what most people use.
So I guess my next question would be, what part do humans play in moving plants and animals around the world? So, I mean, if something is native in a particular area, aren't humans also native? So wouldn't they then be capable of moving plants and stuff around? I guess the non-native versus native term is still real fuzzy to me.
Well, it's time and place. Okay, humans have been moving plants for thousands of years. They've been breeding plants for thousands of years. Where do you think our wheat came from? Corn. These came from prototypic plants that had very small seed heads, and so farmers, agriculturalists selected the larger grains, the more disease-resistant plants. And horticulture's been going on for at least 10,000 years. We've been breeding animals and plants for thousands and thousands of years, and moving plants. And there's pretty clear evidence that Native Americans, they move plants all over the place, because you'll see disjunct populations of herbal plants, dye plants, food plants that are historical Native American settlements, okay, fairly large, long distances from other occurrences of that species. So it's pretty clear that these plants were almost certainly moved by Native Americans. What's interesting is you wonder how large what scale was this done on? Because you have savannas with bur oak, which of course is the most fire-resistant tree, so it's more resistant to fire than your other oaks and most other trees because it has a very thick bark. Okay. But I was hiking up on the North Fork of the Flambeau River a few years ago, and it's all birch and pine, white pine and red pine and spruce and fir, most northern mixed hardwood forest. And here, right at the confluence of the North and the South Forks of the Flambeau River, all of a sudden we walked into this bur oak forest. Like, what? Large, all different size classes. I mean, big trees, small trees. I'm looking at this, what are you doing here? It's not that bur oak doesn't go, it goes all the way into up by Winnipeg. It goes into Canada. But I said, why is this completely different ecosystem here from everything for miles around? Well, the confluence of rivers is a very strategic location because remember, the rivers were the interstate highways of Native Americans because they mostly traveled, like, not mostly, but a lot of people did. Okay. So here was a food plot because the bur oak and the white oak and the swamp white oak acorns are in the white oak group, and they have low tannins in the acorn, which makes it a very delectable food, as opposed to the red oak or black oak group, which has high tannins and not a very good food. So it's almost, the conclusion is almost inescapable. This was a planted orchard of bur oak trees. And right next to it was a big patch of blue beech, Carpinus caroliniana, which, and I think this was, maybe it was a place of worship right next to the orchard. I don't know. I'm making that, completely conjuring that, but why was this there? And how did it last for the last 150, 200 years? So it's fascinating. So I've been known to move plants. So we've been moving plants all the time. Okay, so it comes back to nativity regionally, country-wise, and globally. Okay, so you can define that as I only plant something that's known to occur within 50 miles of my home, which a lot of people, some real crazy people do. Okay, or 100 miles, or 200 miles, or 300 miles. Okay, what's your limit? Okay, people use different definitions for nativity. Okay. I'm not saying one is right or one is wrong. We do know if you move plants too far north and south that you have problems with photoperiod, with blooming and seed production, winter hardiness. So you can take a zone 8 plant and move it to zone 4 and it might die in the winter. You take a zone 4 plant and move it to zone 8 and it gets long and leggy, oftentimes it's more prone to disease. There's obviously genetic variation or genetic adaptations to north-south zones. East to west, if you take a little blue stem from New Jersey and plant it in Kansas, is it drought tolerant enough? Because it grows in western Kansas. If you take a little blue stem from western Kansas and move it to New Jersey, can it tolerate 40 inches of rain and high humidity? Or it will be prone to diseases, etc. We don't have answers to this, okay? There are studies that are showing that there can be variations in a matter of 50 to 100 miles in a plant's response, okay? These are fairly early studies being done in Minnesota, across the state of Minnesota, but people are exploring this, and how far can you move a plant? It depends on the species. It depends on a lot of factors. Okay. So activity.
Okay.
You get to pick the distance. But
so if somebody online, if I'm scrolling Instagram and I get on Native Plant Talk and somebody's saying only plant native, and we're talking about the width of the United States, 3,800 miles. Native could mean very, very different things depending on where I am, where I'm listening from, what my zone is, my climate, all that kind of thing. So really, if you hear the word native, it really needs a little bit more nuance and a deeper dive in order to really know what I should be planting in my area.
A lot more nuance.
Okay.
And this is where I go for a definition of nativity. Regional ecosystem nativity. And there are people that have done this, I believe. Oh gosh, got to get this straight. Is it, I think the Nature Conservancy and maybe USDA. Oh, there's environmental organizations that have developed these maps, and I'm sorry, I can't tell you which ones they are, but they do is they divide the country into regional ecosystems. Okay. They pay no attention to state lines because state lines are completely irrelevant. Okay. It has to do with climate. It has to do with sometimes soils, but not usually soils. So these are the regions where these plant communities occurred. They tend to be sometimes. I think National Wildlife, I think, has done something on this. A lot of different organizations have done this. Okay. And so that's what I use as a guide for what is native. Okay, is it adapted to my region? Okay, my region is defined mostly climatically and, of course, historically as far as what vegetation occurred in that area.
Okay.
So there's plenty of information out there, okay, that people can go to and find this. And they do vary, and you can argue this line or that line or this community, that community. And remember, the plant communities are not restricted to just one kind. I mean, there's all these different, and where I live, we've got savannas, we've got prairies, we've got mesic forests, sugar maple basswood forests, we've got hemlock forests, we've got white pine forests, okay. We have all these different ecosystems, okay. And I can grow just about any of them that will be adapted to my well-drained soil, my sandy soil, not a wetland, obviously. I can pretty much grow all of them where I am because they all occur in my region, okay. So there's no limitation. And some people will go back and look at the original surveyor's maps and say, well, this was a bur oak savanna, so I have to restore a bur oak savanna. Yeah, you can do that. But that's not the only thing that would grow there. And it's not the only thing that's grown there in the last 10,000 years. Okay. You've got examples of prairies and savannas growing on, prairies growing on savanna soils and savannas growing on prairie soils. So savanna growing on a prairie soil, when I say a prairie soil, very deep, organic, rich organic soil, and you have a plant community that invaded that into the prairie because trees somehow were able to invade and grow. Bur oak can invade a prairie, as can hickory, black cherry. And then you've got prairies that invaded a woodland, okay, and the woodland was burned down by native people. These are things that happen over hundreds or thousands of years because the soil takes a long time, but the soil always tells the truth because it doesn't change it overnight. So you've got prairies that are growing on forest soils, okay, which tells you it was a forest for many, many years, and the prairie has not been there long enough to add all that organic matter to increase the organic matter down to 2 or 3 or 4 feet. Okay. So it changes, okay? You're not bound by whatever was growing there 200 years ago. Who says you have to do that? To me, I want biodiversity, so I'm going to plant everything I can to get as much biodiversity on my property. That means as many plant communities as possible, not restricted by what was there or supposedly there 200 years ago. So it depends on what you want to do, okay? Yeah. I don't have this innate desire to turn the clock back. I want functional, diverse ecosystems of native plants, because those native plants, of course, provide on average 10 times the pollinator services and food supply for native species as non-native plants. And that's probably, if you really want to get down to it, that's probably the biggest reason, is that these are biodiverse plants that have co-evolved with pollinators, which are the foundation of the food chain, and other insects, which feed birds and all these, the whole food web. Okay, so that's why I do this. It's for ecological reasons and for psychic reasons, because I know that I'm doing something good to preserve the planet on my own, in my own little corner of the world. I can't change global politics and macroeconomics and the utter destruction of the planet by a bunch of crazy people that care more about money than anything else. Okay, that's not in my control. But if enough of us do this, hundreds, thousands, millions of us do this, we can at least staunch the bleeding and do something good in our own neighborhood and bring ourselves some joy and our neighbors some joy. Native plants are about love. Okay, there's a few crazies that are truly plant Nazis. Okay. And they pursue some sort of weird religion through their native plantism. 99% of native plant people are loving, caring. I want to do something good for the earth, and their intent is not to say, well, you can't plant non-native. You can't plant non-native because it's bad. Okay. Now there are a lot of non-natives that are bad, but as I pointed out earlier, there's natives that are bad. Yeah. So can't use the brush. Anyway.
Frequently, someone will mention a plant being on the invasive species list. What is this list, and how do professionals determine how a plant gets on that list if our geographical area is as vast as the U.S.?
States have lists of noxious weeds, which are based on agriculture, and these lists have been out there for decades. Okay, but moving beyond that, in the last 20 years, 30 years, people have been working with like their state Department of Natural Resources or Department of Conservation to develop lists of invasive plants. And so almost every state has a list on their Department of Natural Resources or Conservation has a list of invasive plants. So you can just Google that, your state list of invasive plants. Okay, and it is state by state because those are the political entities that do this work. Okay, there are also other groups like Wild Ones. If anybody's familiar with the Wild Ones, which is a great group. It's a national organization, and they help people with native plant landscaping, and they have just a wonderful sharing group, and they have local chapters. I would strongly recommend that people look into the Wild Ones, and it's such a helpful sharing group, and people just want to help other people learn more about native plants.
That kind of goes to my next question. I can walk into any nursery, and there will be plants for sale that I know are on at least one invasive species list, like Vinca or Lily of the Valley, et cetera, et cetera. Why do these nurseries sell them if they're clearly going to spread and are on these invasive species lists?
Mostly because a lot of people don't know, and so are not aware of the behavior of these plants. I don't think anybody intentionally plants an invasive plant. That's what I grew up with.
Sure.
Okay. Oh, and Norway maple. What a great plant for urban environments. It's beautiful. And there's all these great varieties, so people plant it. Okay. Not realizing that it's going to be a problem, because most people don't know anything about ecology. They just plant stuff that they know. I mean, why do most people have lawns? Because they don't know any better.
Yeah.
Well, actually, there's an unspoken socioeconomic contract among the middle and upper classes why people have lawns, because it makes them look like a rich English lord.
Yeah.
And also, I get to cut it. I'm lord of my environment. I'm the boss here. Okay. In a native landscape, you gotta seed the ground halfway. Okay. I call it a joint venture with nature. You are not in control. Okay. You're working with nature. You're favoring nature. You have to understand nature and understand the plants that you're working with. Okay. But you're not out there hacking and cutting and spraying and killing all this stuff. You're trying to promote diversity. So for a lot of people, that's threatening, because number one, you have to know what you're doing, and mowing the lawn and spraying it is really simple. Okay, but people just use the plants that they know. But again, it comes down to the market. If people still want Vinca, if they still want snow on a mountain, they're going to plant this stuff, and there you go. Or they're going to get it from their neighbor for free because they're trying to get rid of it.
Right. That's Marketplace probably is more the problem than anything else.
Well, it all comes down to education.
Yeah.
It all comes down to education, and that's why native plant groups are so important, because they spread the word and help educate people. Yeah. So, and you look at all these native plant groups; they're not out there very seldom oppositionally. They're there to encourage people to understand the benefits of native plants and why they're so important, not only to biodiversity but also to our own survival. Yeah. I mean, 1/3 of the foods that we eat are pollinated by pollinators. You lose the pollinators, there goes your food.
Yeah.
I would recommend that everybody read Doug Tallamy's, Tallamy, Douglas Tallamy's book, Bringing Nature Home. He's an entomologist, he's not a plant ecologist, and he studies the utilization of plants by insects, pollinators, etc. And insects are the primary food of baby birds, and for a lot of species. People think, birds eat the seeds at your bird feeder. Well, that's true, but for some species. Okay, and they don't feed those seeds to their babies. They feed them soft, nice little, usually caterpillars. So what Doug and his students at the University of Delaware did was to study the utilization and number of species utilized by different genera, oaks, cherries, willows, etc. And in that book, he actually documents it. So Doug proved what we all kind of sort of thought was true, that native plants support approximately 10 times as many pollinators in their larval stage as do non-native plants. That's a generalization. Also, there are many species that require specific species or genera, or one genus, for their caterpillars. These are called oligolectic insects, and they only can eat the leaves of a certain genus, and that's because plants develop toxins to prevent insects from eating them. It's self-defense. So then the insects, anthropomorphizing, they evolve to the point where they are not harmed by these toxins in the leaves, and that's why you have certain species that are very specific or oligolectic to a certain genus. Okay. And so these non-native plants, these insects can't use them. Because they haven't evolved to eat them, and they're very specific for what they eat. And the plant and the adult insects know to go to that species and lay their eggs on.
Yeah.
So it's all part of this whole big, beautiful mosaic of thousands and thousands of different pollinators, etc. And you also then pollen is more, and nectar is a little more universal. Okay, so a lot of non-native plants actually can provide wonderful pollen and nectar for native insects. Okay. But it's really the leaves that are the most important thing for the caterpillars. And you can read that, again, in Bringing Nature Home. He has many great books. The Nature of Oaks. Oaks are the #1 genus for supporting insect and caterpillars.
Really?
And he also has another book called Nature's Best Hope.
Okay.
So these are 3 incredible books. He's just a genius, and he's a really great guy. So Doug Tallamy, Bringing Nature Home, The Nature of Oaks, and Nature's Best Hope. So that's why, and this is what's so important, about native plants is these relationships with all these different organisms that really form the foundation of the food web. And without them, if you just have non-native plants, there go the insects, and there go the birds.
Right.
So it's all interconnected.
So how would you explain to a hosta or a peony lover or any ornamental plant lover that adding natives isn't about giving up their favorites, it's about feeding what's living around those plants?
My garden is a shared garden. It's not just for me. This is the quiet revolution in native plants. If there's anything I can leave your listeners with, this is the quiet revolution, and that is that gardens are generally designed for the enjoyment of people. A native plant garden is a joint venture with nature, meeting nature halfway and sharing your garden with all these other life forms. And so if I don't have holes on the leaves of my plants, I'm not feeding anybody, and I am therefore a failure as a gardener. Okay? That is the most important thing that I can say today. Okay. Share your garden. Share your garden. Love your neighbors. Bring them in. Except for ticks.
Yeah.
But they're not eating the leaves, they're eating the humans and the dogs.
Yes.
Mandy, do you have a lot of ticks down there in your orchard?
Oh, yeah. We were vacationing in South Dakota and talking with our family from Washington, and they were just amazed that I find a tick on me daily here in Kansas. I mean, sometimes multiple. Very rarely are they attached, but I find them crawling on me daily. Same with my children and my husband. So, Kansas seems to be very, very strong tick area. So, is there a non-native most of our listeners grow that's actually pulling its weight ecologically? Surprising as that might sound.
Yeah. Well, when you say pulling its weight ecologically, providing pollinator services and habitat, et cetera. Sure. I mean, it depends what you use as your criteria for pulling its weight. Let's just look at pollinator services, okay? A few species, herbaceous species, include English lavender, Lavandula angustifolia, and the catnip, a genus Nepeta, Nepeta, okay? And borage, Borago officinalis. So these are great pollinator plants, okay? And for me, catnip is a bit of an invasive plant for me. So, but if you pull it and prevent it from going to seed, you can usually reduce its populations pretty quickly. Okay. Those are when I just look from the standpoint of pollinators. I mean, and look at your fruit trees. I mean, fruit trees are fantastic.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks of honeybees. Okay, and honeybees are a prime pollinator, but they're not the only pollinator. There's native pollinators that we use: apple trees, fruit trees, etc. Okay, so my apple trees are covered with pollinators, not just honeybees. And I know that one of your things we talked about is that honeybees are non-native but universally beloved. Yeah. So why are honeybees so universally beloved? Well, because you can see them. Okay, a lot of our native pollinators, native bees, most of which are solitary, they don't have hives, and you don't get honey.
Yeah.
Why do people love honeybees? Because they make honey.
We get something from them.
Native bees most of them are not colonial, and they don't make honey, so you can't get honey from them. Most of them are so small you don't see them. And one other thing people don't appreciate are native wasps, especially parasitic wasps. You have predaceous wasps like the ones that sting you.
Yeah.
Okay? Most people get stung by yellow jacket. A yellow jacket will just as soon sting you as look at you.
Yep.
Okay, there's the ones you get on your soda can or on your donut, and you put it in your mouth and you get stung in your mouth. Ever have that? Ooh, baby. But the parasitic wasps, most of them are extremely small, and there's a parasitic wasp for every insect, every tick, every spider. As E.L. Wilson, a great entomologist from Harvard, said, the Hymenoptera, which includes bees and ants and wasps, these are the little things that keep everything in control. Because these parasitic wasps, they attack adults, they attack larvae, they attack eggs. There's all different strategies for keeping other species, other insect species and arachnid species, etc., in control. I had a client who had terrible problems with tomato hornworm in his vegetable garden. He planted one of our prairies, 1,000 square feet, okay, the smallest amount of seed we have. Okay, and it had rattlesnake master in it. Rattlesnake master is pollinated primarily by wasps. It's like, oh boy, I want this plant. Okay, but most of those wasps are tiny little parasitic wasps. Once that rattlesnake master started blooming, his problem with tomato hornworm went away. Because he had little parasites. Okay, they came to the rattlesnake master, okay, pollinating it, and then they lay their eggs on top of the tomato hornworm larva, which then burrow into the larva and eat it from the inside out, and then split it open and come out as adults. He thought that movie Alien was like
Alien, yeah.
That's just inspired by what nature does. And so wasps are super important members of your gardens. Parasitic wasps. Okay?
Wow.
Super important because they keep all the other bad guys in control. I'm not saying it's going to be perfect, but it's
Isn't
amazing.
there a parasitic wasp that lays on Japanese beetles? Because somebody was telling me that if you see a Japanese beetle that has like white dots on its back, it's been attacked by this parasitic wasp, and to leave those alive so that the wasp can.
I sure hope so. I'm not familiar with that. I'm not an entomologist, but I sure hope there is.
I hope so too. 'Cause those are all over our area.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Many of our listeners are hosta collectors, not just hosta fans, but may be ready to start considering some natives. What's one realistic first step they could take this season?
Educate yourself on native plants. Okay. In my hosta gardens, I interplanted them with all kinds of native wildflowers, ferns, sedges, woodland, shade-loving sedges. Okay, sedges are grass-like plants. They're not grasses, but they're similar in their appearance, but they are different botanically. But I would plant trilliums and twin leaf and jack-in-the-pulpit and bloodroot. And what's really cool about spring ephemerals, this is what I think are some of the best things you can put in there. The spring ephemerals are blooming late April, May, and June. The hostas haven't even hardly emerged yet because they tend to come up a little bit later. So I have this beautiful wildflower garden with the hostas, and in between the hostas, because you have to make sure you're not in the same root zone, so they have plenty of room to grow. But you have a big thing like Summit Substance or Blue Angel and these really big ones. Okay, there's all this space in between them. You can fill that space with spring blooming native wildflowers, and so you get to show 2 months before your hostas really develop. Okay, and then when the hostas come up, they will cover that. And a lot of these species, of these native wildflowers, will go dormant, and the hostas just cover them, and they're very compatible. But that's what I do, spring ephemerals. And then in the late season, okay, you've got native woodland goldenrods and asters that are blooming in late August, September, into October. Okay? So you've got late season interest. You're going to have to be strategic where you put them because the hosta leaves are going to still be there. Okay, so you can't use them like you did the spring ephemerals that will be under the leaves. You have to have their own little spots in between the hostas. And these are really important because asters and goldenrods are phenomenal pollinator attractors, whether it's in the prairie or a woodland. There's a lot of woodland asters and goldenrods that look really nice. And most of them don't get more than a couple feet tall. So they fit the space. You don't have 5 foot tall plants in there. Generally, they're shorter. So those are the species that I use. And you also got some native euchres that you can put in there, which another different textural contrast to the hostas. Especially, let's talk about maples. Okay, in the deep shade of maples, there's a plant called wild ginger, Asarum canadense, which will grow under, beautiful ground cover under maples. It has a superficial root. It doesn't go very deep, so it's able to grow in a small amount of soil that's in between the roots of maples. And it's interesting. I just use nature as my guide, and I did an inventory on a place called Galena Territory in northwest Illinois, and they had, 150 different natural areas that were preserved as part of their development. And there was one area that was a solid maple. Nothing was growing there except wild ginger. And an interesting thing, if you look at trees, there's a concept called leaf area index. That's the number of leaves from the top to the ground level that the sun has to go through to get to the ground. Yeah. Well, sugar maple has a leaf area index of about 7. It means that the light has to go through 7 leaves, which is why there's so little at the base. I think oaks are usually around 3. Okay, and that's why you see these rich floral displays in oaks, oak woodlands, and not in maple forests as much. Okay, because there's enough light that gets it. That's one factor, but a lot of it's light. Also, the rooting zone to some degree. Okay, so sugar maples just squash everything, but wild ginger, almost everything, will grow in that. Some other examples of plants for growing in shallow soils under maples in shade include Pennsylvania sedge, Carex pennsylvanica. There are a number of different sedges that are fantastic for shade. The Carex pennsylvanica has a lateral root system, a rhizomatous root system. It's able to grow in fairly shallow soils. It's very drought resistant. So you have issues with water availability because of the maple roots sucking all the water out. Wild ginger will grow in rocks. Okay, typically dolomite or limestone. It likes a more alkaline, above a pH above 7. So it's able to grow in very dry conditions. Another rhizomatous plant, big leaf aster. Okay, it used to be Aster macrophyllus. Now it's Symphyotrichum macrophyllum. Okay, dwarf crested iris, Iris cristata. That will grow in dappled shade, not deep shade. Okay, but it will grow in those little crevices between the roots because it has a rhizomatous root system. It doesn't need to go deep, and it's relatively drought resistant. And if you need a ground cover, there's good old Podophyllum peltatum, mayapple.
Mayapple. Okay, I've heard of that.
Yeah. Now it creeps and it will spread. The mayapple will grow in pretty dry situations, and it creeps by rhizome, so it doesn't need a deep soil because there is no deep soil under the roots of maple trees. So these are just some examples of native woodland plants, and there are others, but these are some of the more reliable ones that you can use in those situations.
What about trees? I in my property, we are we are in the process of cutting down our ash trees because they are either dying or dead. And I want to replace them with native trees and maybe even an understory tree. What would you recommend instead of some of the understory non-natives that may be more popular?
Sure. I'll tell you, one of my favorite trees is ironwood. Okay, Astraea virginiana. Very underused in the landscape. And it's a woodland understory tree, but if you have a sandy loam, silt loam, soil well drained, not real dry, heavy clay, might be a little dicey, it's pretty adaptable. Okay, it makes a great tree in full sun.
Okay.
Okay, on my property I plant them in threes in a triangle.
Okay.
And then as they grow, they form a shaded little cluster, and then you got this interior area, and you can plant them in circles. You can plant one. Okay, it makes a great specimen tree, growing right in the full sun. Even though, and you'll never find it growing naturally in the full sun, it adapts very well to that.
Okay.
What was the tree's name again? What was it?
Ironwood or Eastern hop hornbeam.
Okay.
So that's Astraea virginiana. They haven't changed that. They don't change the tree names as much. Okay. Closely related to that is the blue beech. Okay. Or musclewood. I like musclewood. That's a pretty cool term.
That's a cool name.
It has this beautiful bluish gray wood, and it's called musclewood because it has it's not round. Okay, it has forms like a muscle on an arm.
Huh.
Okay, and that's Carpinus, Carpinus, caroliniana, just sort of like Carolina, but caroliniana, Carpinus. Okay. And that also will grow. I would keep that one in the woods. I haven't ever tried that in full sun. Some people do, and it seems to do okay. But that might be a little dicey in full sun. Yeah. And then there's redbud. If you have a well-drained soil, as a friend of mine says, you put it in clay, you can change the name to deadbud. So, redbud, Cercis, Cercis, Cercis canadensis. Okay, I grow that in rock. When I have this dolomitic soil, ledge outcrop, and there's places where I put a shovel in the ground, it might go an inch or two, and it hits rock. When I plant trees in it, it's about 80% rock, 20% soil. That's perfect for a redbud. They love growing in rocky soils. Yeah, you go to the Ozarks in Missouri, there's just redbuds everywhere.
Yeah.
The flinty hillsides there, that's what it loves. You put it in a heavy soil, it's probably going to struggle. Loamy soil, yeah, does great. If you put it in a clay loam or something heavy, not a good idea.
Okay.
So these are some natives, but I'll tell you, the ironwood, the blue beech, and the redbud, those are your three best choices.
Okay.
And make sure if you're getting a redbud, get the Columbus strain. This was discovered in Columbus, Wisconsin. Okay. And it is allegedly the hardiest strain of redbud, which is a southern species. It does not naturally occur here. Someone must have planted it and it survived the winter, and so that's the one that people use.
Now I have two more trees I was going to ask you about. One is it's got some kind of pagoda name.
Pagoda dogwood.
That's it.
Oh my God, I forgot that. Oh yes, of course.
Pagoda dogwood, and the other one is serviceberry.
grow both of these, of course.
Okay.
Yeah, they're great plants. Yeah, we offer both of these. Thank you for remembering that. I should have thought of that. Yeah, and what I do with my serviceberry, mostly it's usually planted as a branching shrub. When they're small, I train them into a tree, just one stem. And so I get this large tree, okay, which I've got serviceberry that are like 30 feet tall, okay? And the birds love the fruit. They're great for pollinators. They're one of their first native shrubs to bloom in the spring.
Okay.
So you're providing pollinator services for pollinators early in the season before the apple trees come out, okay? Or before other pollinators. Like most of your native shrubs bloom in June. Okay, but the serviceberry is blooming in late April and May.
Yeah.
That's great. How could I forget that? And pagoda dogwood, that's like my favorite one. See, when you said small trees, these are actually shrubs. So they're not really trees. That's why I didn't think of them. Although you can turn the serviceberry into a tree like I did by just having one stem. Cut all the other stems away, okay, and just let one go up, and now you got a tree.
Yeah.
Pagoda dogwood, be careful. All my trees, I have to fence them. I have a 5-foot steel woven wire fence around them and little tree protectors on their base. So I had this beautiful dogwood. I mean, just a perfect specimen, if you're familiar, of the pagoda dogwood.
Beautiful.
And it was like, 3-4 inches around. Okay, it's big enough I can take the fence off. Overnight, the deer shredded it.
Oh,
no.
And it was in the fall, and they rubbed on it with their antlers and killed 50% of the tree. I'm going to have to cut it back to the ground and let it start over.
Oh.
You're never safe from deer where I live. You're never safe.
Oh, goodness.
Well, eventually when you get enough bark on it. But see, it's a soft wood, and the deer love to rub on it.
sure. Okay.
Wow.
So be careful. But those are great suggestions. Not trees, but understory shrubs. But you can make the amelanchier, the serviceberry, you can turn that into a tree.
Make it look like it. Okay. Turn it
Okay.
in. Great. Perfect. Well, thank you. Well, Neil, we would like to play a game with you that we are calling Is It a Hosta or Not?
We'll give you the name of a real plant, and all you have to decide is it a hosta name or something else?
Oh my God.
Get 3 out of 5 correct, and you'll win a Hosta La Vista vinyl water bottle sticker for a lucky listener. Betsy, who's Neil playing for today?
Oh my gosh.
He is playing for Jake and Sarah of River Falls, Wisconsin.
Okay, are you ready? Okay, number 1 is woodland elf.
I think that is. I know there's some elf hosta, so I'll go yes.
Okay,
You are correct.
yay. Okay, number 2, prairie sky.
Prairie sky is actually a switchgrass, Panicum brigatum.
Oh,
So, unless they've got a hosta named Prairie Sky, but there's a Panicum brigatum named Prairie Sky.
and it's a hosta name. Yes,
No way! They stole it from native
They
prairie
s-
plants.
they might have. Who knows?
No, Prairie Sky was named by my friend Roger Gettig as a switchgrass. Wow.
Well, we'll give it to
Okay.
you because it's obviously named a native
No.
plant as well.
No, it's okay.
Okay.
Okay, number 3 is doll's eyes.
No.
Okay,
Correct.
correct.
Doll's Eyes is Actea alba. Well, they changed it now. It's not Actea anymore. Now it's what they change it to? Actea pachypoda.
Oh,
There you
okay.
go. Okay.
All right, number 4 is lime Ricky.
Lime what?
Lime Ricky?
Lime Ricky. Boy, that sure sounds like a hosta name. I'll go with it.
It is not.
Probably a disease.
It's it is not.
It's a Hucarella.
Oh, is that one of Dan Heim's creations? It's probably with a name like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dan Heim's is hybridized. I don't know how many different heuchers. He's got a heucher for every corner of the garden, and your grandma and your aunt and everybody else.
Number 5 is maidenhair.
That's a fern.
That is
Correct.
a fern. Very good. I think you
Wow.
got at least 3. Well, you did great, and Jay won his sticker.
Awesome.
All right. Well, I'm glad I was able to help.
Neil, you already kind of mentioned earlier that, if a listener just wants to remember one thing about this native plant discussion, what would you want it to be? And you had said
That the garden is not just for us. We plant garden to share it with all the other inhabitants of this planet that can use it. And it's a joint venture with nature where we share our gardens with all the other life forms, except ticks.
yeah, right?
All the other life forms that make this world an amazing place. And
Yeah.
again, it's all about the love of nature, love of the land, love of your fellow human being, and providing examples for how we can have more sustainable, earth-friendly, and nurturing landscapes.
Yeah.
That's great.
Is there anything else you'd like to leave listeners with?
I would just like to thank you for the opportunity to be on your program. I hope this was helpful for people as we debate native plants versus non-native plants, and what really is a wise path to tread here that takes into account not whether a plant is native or non-native, but whether it is a good member of the plant community and not an invasive thug that harms others.
Yeah.
Sure. And where should people go to learn more about Prairie Nursery and native plants?
You can go to prairienursery.com, and we offer plants, transplants, which we ship in the spring and the fall. And we have seed mixes for all different situations, for dry sandy soils, for heavy clay soils, short mixes, tall mixes, intermediate mixes, low growing mixes, wetland mixes for detention basins and moist meadows. So pollinator mixes, butterfly mixes. So, and we have plant gardens, pre-designed gardens, so you don't have to figure out the garden layout. We've got the layout, it comes with the garden. You just follow the map and put in your plants. These are very popular. Takes all the guesswork out of it. So those are some great products that people could be interested in, and hopefully they'll find something that they like that matches their growing conditions.
It's wonderful.
Awesome. Well, Neil, this was a genuinely great conversation. Thank you so much for helping bridge the gap between native plants and ornamentals.
Well, thank you, Betsy and Mandy. This has been really enjoyable for me too, and it's always fun to talk about all these aspects of plants, whether they're native, non-native. But I know what plant people are good people. Plant people are loving people. So I think if we can get past any contentiousness and really find some common ground, that's really what we need to do.
Definitely. Well, that's it for this episode of Hosta La Vista, the Friendship Plant Podcast.
Find Neil and Prairie Nursery's full plant list at their website, prairienursery.com, and find us at hostalavista.org and on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok.
New episodes drop every Saturday through the growing season. Reach out to us at hostalavistapodcast@gmail.com. And until next time,
Hasta la vista, baby. Amigos y amigas, hasta la vista.
Thank you so much, Neil. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Neil. Special thanks to Green Hill Hostas for sponsoring Season 2 of Hosta La Vista. Green Hill Hostas, home of great new hostas.
And In the Country Garden and Gifts. This is Hosta Country. Visit their website at inthecountrygardenandgifts.com.